Welcome back to HANA Basics for Developers. So in this unit, we're going to take a closer look at one of the most powerful features of Node.js, and that's its huge ecosystem of reusable modules and how easy it is to reference them and use them in your application. I think this is really probably is what has caused Node.js to take off with such popularity. Of course, many development environments and languages have this ability to reuse modules, libraries, something like that. But Node.js makes it so easy to go out to the internet and get a module and use it in your application without having the developer to have to know where to go to get that, what all the dependencies are and how to get those dependencies. The package management tools that come with Node.js are just so powerful and so easy to use, as we're going to show you in this exercise. Now, one of the things that we have to keep in mind, though, before we start doing some development, there are a few little prerequisites here. And I want to show you a little bit about the installation of the Web IDE, actually, to take us back a step. And I think this is important to understand what's going on here, because there's obviously Node modules, as we've seen, that SAP delivers, and they're stored and accessed separately from the rest of all the open source modules. And there is some configuration that has to be done to your system that controls which set of modules that you can access. Because we also have some open source modules that SAP delivers pre-packaged into the Web IDE. So let's see what all this looks like. Actually, let's go outside of the Web IDE and let's come here to the installation files itself of the Web IDE. So what I have here is I have the mtar file. It's a little over a gigabyte. It's pretty big. It's got a lot of content in it. But as you're going to see here, this is just a zip file. So I'll bring it back over here to my other monitor. And inside the zip file, you've got the different components, the different microservices that make up the Web IDE itself, the database module, the runner, which is done in Java, the UI5 portions. But what we're interested in is actually this local NPN registry. That's something. This is the part that's built into the Web IDE that has all the Node.js modules, all the SAP delivered ones, and all the open source ones. Okay, and you notice it's almost half a gig, so it's taking up, it's about half the size of the content of the Web IDE itself is just all these reusable modules. And let's go ahead and open this up. It's just another zip inside there, and what you'll see here is we're actually reusing an open source module called Sinopia that's going to serve out these Node modules. Rather than us having to go to the internet to get them, it's going to be like a little local site built into the Web IDE itself, sometimes referred to as Sinopia Cache. Now, what we have here, if we come inside of Sinopia and then we look in the storage folder, what we're going to see is this is the complete list of all the Node modules that are available in the local registry. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll unpack this zip to a file on my local machine as a developer, and then I have access to come and see all these Node modules. And for instance, I could come here to the @SAP and I can see all the modules that SAP delivers. Likewise, I can see all of the standard ones that SAP redistributes, and you see there's quite a few of them here, and on many of them, what we'll see, I'll just pick one at random here. Yeah, we even have different versions. Okay, so different major versions are delivered inside here as well. So this is all built into the Web IDE, and in fact, I could come here to another web browser window, and I've got a little shortcut here because this has a URL that I can go to. Now, this is basically the URL that's pointing to my local system and this local NPN registry. This is when I build in the Web IDE, what it's actually calling behind the scenes to go fetch those NPN modules. that I need. And I could come here. Now, the one thing I'll tell you is the search does not work. You don't need to put in your username and password. That doesn't work. This login doesn't work. This is a very bare bones version of Sinopia that we use really just for our internal caching mechanisms. But what I can do, if I know the name of the module that I want, if I come here and I look in the zip file and I know the name, like if I would come up here to the beginning and I would say, oh yeah, this at SAP one, oh, the app router. I want to see what versions of the app router I have available. So I just add onto the URL the name that I want. So app router. And it's going to go and fetch that, if I type that in right. Yes. And it will pull back all the versions that are contained in the cache. And I just want to collapse all these down so you can see the versions. There's quite a few different versions. On a lot of the SAP modules, we deliver a lot of different versions to support backwards compatibility with many different releases, projects that customers have already done. What we can see here is, yes, we have all these different versions. We have the latest version is 5.10.2. If you scroll here, here's the documentation. Although we'll come back to that in a minute. This is a little difficult to read, the documentation from here, because it's got a lot of internal formatting. But actually, we could come here and we see all the modules that it's dependent upon. We see the start script. We can even get the link to download this in a zip file. If I would click this, I would have to adjust the URL. Oh, no, not HTTP, HTTPS. That is one thing that's kind of weird. The URL that it builds in the display doesn't have the HTTPS on it. You have to add the HTTPS, but then I could download that one zip file and look at the one module. So even if you didn't have access to this original zip file here, I can get the contents, but I can't search. I have to know the name of the module that I want to look for. That's where having the original installation files that I can unzip on my local machine is also very nice. Now, one thing I will show you, if I go into the app router, notice that the versions that are maintained here, it only goes up to 5.8.0. And you might be wondering, now wait a minute, I came here into the app router and I saw from the web interface that the latest version was actually, if I could scroll all the way down, the latest version was actually 5.10.2, and that's the version that I just downloaded, but it's not here in the zip file. We only have up to 5.8. Well, that's because what's available in the local Sinopia that we send with the Web IDE isn't the only thing that you're limited to. We can actually, when we install the Web IDE, you have the option to do this. You can specify an upstream link. So that's what I've done on my system, is during installation time, when before you install the Web IDE, you can take this MTA.ext file and customize it for your environment to tell you what upstream link that you want to use here. Both a public one, registry.npnjs.org. That's usually what people use for their public repository, and npn.sap.com. Now that's available on the internet, and that's where SAP publishes the latest version of all of our modules. This way we can introduce fixes and new functionality in the modules without having to produce a patch of the Web IDE. So you can always, if you configure this, when you're in the Web IDE or when you access the Sinopia cache as we saw, it will not only check the local files that are installed as part of the Web IDE, but it'll automatically go out to the internet and see if there's a newer version. Or if I specify a module that isn't in the local cache at all, I mean, we have a few hundred there, but there are hundreds of thousands of them available on the internet. Well, it will go out to the internet and get those as well. The only thing that I'll point out here, you could also configure your own internal NPN repositories as well. If you have a corporate specific one, you could add that in here. But many times you're sitting behind a firewall. Your HANA server is, and you might have to also add proxy configuration here as well. Now, I am not behind a firewall, so I don't need any proxy configuration settings. I would refer you to the Web IDE installation guide, and I'll put a link in the show notes of this video. It has a complete description of how to configure this MTA ext file, what the property names are for the, if you do need to configure a proxy. So it's all documented very well in the installation guide, and I will give you a link to that. But my system is configured. I can go to the public repository. I can go to the SAP repository. And the thing is, if I go to the public repository, that does have a web interface, npnjs.com. And for instance, I can come here and I can just put in any search string I want, like Excel, and it's going to pull back all the Node modules that have Excel in the name or the description or the tags. And what you can see here is there's so many open source modules. I mean, I got 1,112 modules that somehow have something to do with Excel. The hard part about NPN and Node modules in general is that you're going to have so many options. You may have a hard time narrowing it down to what is the best option to choose. Now, what I won't get is if I come here and I do at SAP app router, is I'm not going to find that. Okay, so the SAP modules are not here. They're actually, if you remember, we had two different URLs. It's actually npn.sap.com. Now, unfortunately, if you go to npn.sap.com, I'm not going to. Actually, I should put HTTPS on the front of that. I'm going to get a web page that basically says no web browsing. So we can hit it with NPN, but I cannot hit it through the web. So once again, I can't search. So I kind of come back to, it's nice to have the zip file here that I can look at all the local modules, because that's going to give me an idea of what all the SAP modules that are configured. But there is another option here. I can use the command line NPN. So what I've done is on my local machine, I have configured NPN. So if I go to my user, there's a configuration file in your user directory, npn rc. And I have just configured it. You have to tell it about the SAP registry. So basically I'm saying any modules that start with @SAP, don't go to the public registry, but instead go to npn.sap.com. And now if I open a command line, I can issue npn commands from here as well. For instance, I can do npn, I can just do info @SAP app router. And this would be just like I did with the Sinopia cache with the URL, except I don't have to escape the forward slashes. I can just type it directly. It's actually going out to npn, and it's going to the SAP npn, the public one, and it's pulling back the same sort of information. It's getting what the latest module is. It's getting the README, and pulling down all the different versions. It's a large README, so I'd have to scroll pretty far up to find, yeah, there's all the other information. Basically that same information that I got from the Sinopia URL, I can also get from the command line. The other thing that I can do here, just like I could download the module to my local machine, I can also do an npn install and get certain modules, and it will copy them down to my local machine. So I've seen a couple different ways I could get them from the URL of the Sinopia cache. I could unzip the file and of the local, but then I only have the versions that are packed in locally. But I could also use npn from the command line to get them. And this is where it's interesting, is this README file that's kind of difficult to read because all the content is blobbed in here together. Well, once I download these files, I can open them I'm using Visual Studio Code. So let me come here, and I've got my my node modules. I'll just open that whole folder. And for instance, I've already unpacked a lot of the node modules. For instance, I actually don't have the app router in here. That isn't one that I pulled down recently, but like the HDI deployer. And I can come into it and I can click on the README file here. And now I get a nicely formatted display. And this is because I actually added an extension to Visual Studio Code. You see some of the extensions that I have here: ABOP, ESLint, Git history. But I have some Node README extension, and that's what takes that blob with the markup language and turns it into something readable. So if you're going to do a lot of Node development with a lot of even just our SAP modules, since we don't have a web interface to our Npn repository, and because the Sinopia interface will only return sort of the raw JSON information and the zip files themselves, I recommend going and getting a tool like Visual Studio Code. It's a free tool from Microsoft. Getting this extension, and now you can read the README files. And one thing you'll see is there's just a huge amount of helpful documentation in most of these SAP README files that you will not find in help.sap.com. And even if you aren't doing Node development, even if you're just doing HDI development, this README file that's in the HDI deployer has a tremendous amount of documentation about HTTP grants files, HTTP synonyms, how to do cross-container access, documentation of all these different file formats. And as I said, unfortunately, you won't find this documentation in help.sap.com. You'll only find it here in the README file. So hopefully that's some useful little hints and tips that will help you get started and connected to Node modules. But now let's see how we can code with some of these Node modules. We've already seen some of this. It's pretty unavoidable. We've accessed some of the SAP delivered modules. But let's look at some of these that aren't in the SAP. But we're going to access from the internet here and pull in some standard open source modules. And remember, way back when we started our project, in our package.json, this is where you list your modules and what version that you want to point to. And we have different ways. We can wildcard some of these and say, give me, only major versions, give me a very specific patch level version, always give me the latest version of the module. That can be dangerous if you have something that changes a lot. Maybe it makes an incompatible change and breaks your code the next time you build. But I only use that on really stable kind of modules. But we have some here for Excel and Zip and XML. Let's see how we can use these in our project. But one thing you're gonna see, all we have to do is give it the name of the module and the version. We don't have to tell it where to go to get it. We don't have to download the zip file. We don't have to do any of that. When we run from the web IDE or when we deploy our application or package it for deployment, it's automatically going to call npn and go get that module from wherever it is, whether it's in the SAP npn, whether it's in the local cache, whether we have to go to the internet and get it, whether we have to go to the public repository. We don't have to know that or care about it as developers. We just say what we want in the package.json, and the system's automatically going to go and get it for us. I think that's so cool and so powerful. It makes it really easy to use these, but keep in mind, there can be some danger here. You're using open source libraries. Some of them could have bad code, could have malicious code. So always look at what you're utilizing. Go study it, read the README, read what comments people have made on it online. The ones inside the SAP cache, we've already done code scans on to make sure we verified that they're safe and we've tested them. So you can be pretty good knowing that the ones, even the open source ones that you find here inside the registry, these are good. They're safe. If you go grab something just from the internet, you have to take responsibility for that module. And always keep in mind, even if you use one that's from SAP, check the license on it. I mean, we redistribute it as part of our commercial software, so if we include it, the licensing model must be pretty good. It's not going to force you to have to change the license on your overall application. But if you just go grab something from the internet, from the public NPN repository, these could have lots of different licenses on them. So, like when I come here and I'm searching, maybe I go grab this Excel one. Always take a look at. I always try to go read the license, know about the different open source licenses, know what they mean for your application, but also go to the home page. Most of them are hosted on GitHub. You can view the source code even before you pull it into your project. You can read the help, but I also always go look at like the issues, see what people are posting about the module. Of course, if it had some malicious code or really bad code, chances are good that somebody will have created an issue for that. So, you have a lot of information to base your usage decision upon, but it still is your responsibility. Now that we've got sort of that disclaimer out of the way, let's go ahead and let's start using some of these. So let's add some more route handlers here. So let's use one for Excel. So app use. Let's do a little nice Excel example. Node Excel. Require routes. Excel. There we are, and let's create our file. Excel.json. Oof. I typoed that, didn't I? That's okay. We will rename it. There we are. And we've prepared a code sample, which we'll now look at. X5 Excel, not JS. All right, let's pull this in. We're going to see most of this code, most of it's just performing our database query. So we're going to select from our PO item view. We're going to purchase order header, product ID, gross amount. That's going to return the results in JSON format. So we're just going to create an array of that data with the ID, product, and amount. And then we're going to convert that to Excel. This Excel that you see here, this is our Node.js module, Node XLSX. I came out here and I searched for these. We're not actually going to use this Excel one that I was looking at. We're going to use another popular one, Node XLSX. I always find that a bit of a tongue twister there. Let's actually search for this one. So this is the one that we're going to use in our example. I studied a bunch of different ones. This was pretty easy to use, had the functionality I wanted, had a good license model, had good support on it, so I decided to go with that. Really easy. Passes, we pass in the data that we want to use. This out is our array of data. It's going to put in the results, basically going to be a binary string. It's going to be real Excel, not text tab delimited, not CSV, but real Microsoft Excel. So we'll set the response type to MS Excel, and then it'll open in Excel in place in the browser. So let's go ahead and run this, and we will test it now. Oh, I don't have a Node Excel, and what we'll see is we should get, what did I, Excel/download, get my URL right. No. Excel download, okay. What did I typo here? Oh, I put an extra dot in there, that's not good. So we'll just correct that real quick. Fixed. Now we'll run this again. There we are. It's downloading an Excel file, and I get it as a browser download. I double click on it, and it will open in Microsoft Excel. And we have all of the cool kinds of things like multiple tabs. We could have put formatting in here, header columns. We kept it pretty straightforward, but as I said, true Microsoft Excel, not text tab delimited CSV or anything like that. So we have access to the full range of Excel capabilities when we produce this output here. Okay, so nice simple example. Let's do another one. Another common thing that we want to do is XML parsing. We don't have an XML parser that we've written as SAP for Node.js. We don't need to because there's already some open source ones. Okay, so this is also going to keep us at SAP. Like in the old XSJS world, we used to have to write all these things. We had to write XML parsing, zip libraries in XSJS. Here, we're not going to spend our time doing this. We can spend our time improving the enterprise-specific features, the HANA-specific features, and let you just reuse the open source things that already exist. So we'll just create xml.js, and go grab our code snippet. XML. Once again, we will get access to our module. The module name here is XML doc. So let's go back and let's look at this one, XML doc. So here's the module that I chose. Once again, lots of different options when it comes to XML. I liked the simplicity of this particular one. So went with it. It did what I wanted it to do. And we'll keep this example really simple. We'll take an XML string, and we'll have the XML library parse it and create an XML object, and then we can use different XML type operations like for each child, and then output it. So nothing terribly complex, but just to show you the basic capabilities here. Of course, you could find other XML parsing libraries that maybe do more than the one that I chose, but it's a nice starting point. XML, example 1, there we are, and it's just parse to from heading body, and what we see here is our to from heading body. So we're parsing everything underneath note. Well, we don't get any of the rest of the content here. So very nice, very easy to use. Another very common example would be zip. We want to use zip compression to combine, multiple pieces of content that we want to download as a single file, or we want to compress the data that we're outputting. Very common use case. Once again, in XSJS, we had to create a special $sign API for this. You had to wait till SAP did that. SAP, you always had to wait for SAP to make enhancements. Now, we have lots of options here, open source options for zip processing. So let's do the same thing. Let's go create another file. Let's grab my source code. Grab my example. Let's put it in here. And what we see is the module that I'm going to use is called Node-zip. Come here and we can look at Node-zip. So again, many different zip packages out here. I chose Node-zip. It's got no license on it at all. It was really simple to use. Once again, there's probably ones that are more complicated, have more features. This is old, published 4 years ago. I don't think it's been updated a whole lot, but heck, it did what I needed it to do quite simply. So what I'm able to do here is I'm actually going to create multiple files within the zip and add text content to the different files. We can even create subfolders inside the zip. Then just call the generate command, and it will give us a binary string, a binary array that we can pass back and the response object. Notice because it is binary data, we're going to send it back as a buffer into the response object. So and here I'm just doing the same sort of thing. I'm taking the data of a query, creating a data array out of it, and then putting that, I was converting into text tab delimited, and then inserting that into a zip file so I can download it. So let's run this one, and we'll test it. And then we'll run over here. Zip. Let's do our simple example first that had the multiple files and folders. Just download that, and then we'll open it in a zip utility on my client side. Text file, demo2 text. It opened actually on my other window here. It's the new zip processing in Node.js. I created a folder inside here, and it's got a file inside of it. So we created all that using the API, using the Node.js module. We didn't have to create files, write files out of the file system, and then zip them up or anything like that. And here's a database query that we took and exported as a zip file as well. We open that up, text tab delimited, little text file inside there. There's the data compressed inside the zip. So that's just a couple of simple examples, but common ones that I know customers run into and want to do with zip processing. Hopefully, we've given you, not so much these specific examples, but we've opened you to the possibilities of what's out there. And chances are really good. If there's something you want to do technically in Node.js, someone has probably already done it and published it as a Node module. Just about anything you can imagine, there's something out there to help you with, and there's no reason to have to reinvent the wheel. We've seen how easy it is to access these modules. They get packaged into your code when you deploy it, like all the other content, so you don't have to worry about, when I get to production, is it going to have a connection to the internet? It doesn't actually have to have a connection to the internet. The Node modules get packaged along with your content. And when you send it downstream systems, they're in the MTA. We'll see more about packaging later, but this is a very safe thing to do. We've given you this cache. We've pre-checked a lot of the open source all the open source modules that are in there. So even if you don't have a connection to the internet, even if you don't want to access the hundreds of thousands of open source modules, there's still a lot of value to be had in the hundreds that we distribute with SAP, with the Web IDE. And of course, you have all the SAP delivered Node.js modules, which really round out the Node.js development environment for you.